Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Harold Koplowitz, founder and president of the Child Mind Institute, and I am delighted to welcome you to our first ever virtual back-to-school luncheon. The topic today is preparing our kids to thrive in an uncertain world. This world certainly is uncertain. In March, when we postponed our spring luncheon, I had no idea we'd still be remote 6 months later. But this crisis has taught us how important it is to be innovative and uncompromising when it comes to staying connected, for us and for our children. And I'm grateful to all of you for your willingness to be here and support the Child Mind Institute no matter where you are. At the Child Mind Institute, we transform the lives of children and families struggling with mental health and learning disorders through expert clinical and community care, scientific research, and wide-reaching public education programs. And with the onset of coronavirus, we pivoted immediately from our established model to address the immense mental health impacts of COVID-19 on children, to serve families who are facing new stresses, unimaginable barriers, and profound losses. We have mobilized to offer telehealth and a range of remote treatments and supports to thousands of children, educators, and parents. And we've dramatically expanded our work, delivering evidence-based resources and support to millions through childmind.org and our social media platforms, including an incredible Facebook Live series in English and Spanish. Every family has been impacted by this crisis. I hope you have felt that the Child Mind Institute has been here for you as a trusted resource. We have certainly felt your support, and we are so grateful. Today, we'll hear from my friend and colleague, Dr. Madeline Levine, psychologist and author of Ready or Not, Preparing Our Kids to Thrive in an Uncertain and Rapidly Changing World. Also, Dr. Stephanie Lee, Senior Director of the ADHD and Behavior Disorder Center at the Child Mind Institute, and Allie Wenworth, actress, comedian, author, and our dear friend. They're fantastic, and I'm sure this discussion will offer strategies on helping kids develop resilience, adaptability, and grit, which will help them face an educational system and a world that have totally transformed. We'll leave time for questions toward the end of the discussion. And again, thank you all so much for being here. Your children thank you, as do children everywhere. Before we hear from our speakers, we'll watch a short video on the Child Mind Institute's recent work and hear from longtime Child Mind Institute supporter and event co-chair, Sarah Weiner.
For over a decade, the Child Mind Institute has been transforming the lives of children and families struggling with mental health and learning disorders. We deliver gold standard clinical care, pioneer scientific discoveries about the developing brain, and improve access to mental health interventions through far-reaching school, community, and public education programs. In just 10 years, we've reached nearly 50,000 children, and millions of adults around the world have visited our website and social media platforms for reliable information. The world around us has been radically transformed by the spread of the coronavirus. Across the country, children and families are dealing with illness, loss, grief, social isolation, financial insecurity, and increased fear and anxiety. At the same time, racial injustice has led to widespread protests and civil unrest. Our mental health is under immense strain, and the 17 million children in the United States with an existing mental health or learning disorder are particularly vulnerable. At the Child Mind Institute, we mobilized rapidly at the start of the pandemic to serve those who need our care and support more than ever.
So let's start talking about what telehealth actually is.
Through secure telehealth platforms and added health and safety measures for in-person sessions, we continue to provide critical, direct treatment. We are training educators and mental health professionals so they can provide our comprehensive list of evidence-based services to their school communities. Our researchers are adapting to study and alleviate the mental health effects of the crisis while continuing to develop the diagnostic tools and treatments of tomorrow. By hosting webinars and regular Facebook Lives in English and Spanish, our clinicians are live streaming support to hundreds of thousands of families and teachers around the country, regardless of location or ability to pay. We are rapidly creating timely, relevant resources on supporting children through this crisis and sharing them on our website and social media. Through critical partnerships, our We Thrive Inside campaign, Student Success Program, and parent helplines for healthcare workers and first responders, we are making sure expert, accurate information about children's mental health reaches families around the country with urgent needs.
I was in trouble. The Child Mind Institute changed my life.
The Child Mind Institute
The
changed
Child
our
Mind
lives.
Institute changed my life.
Children, families, and teachers need the Child Mind Institute, and we need your support. Please give today so that the Child Mind Institute can continue this critical work to ensure the most vulnerable children make it through this crisis and reach their full potential.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Weiner, one of the co-chairs of today's event. Thank you to my fellow co-chairs, host committee members, and sponsors, including our platinum sponsor, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books, our gold sponsor, Coco and Breezy and Zenny, and our silver sponsor, Centis. And thank you to everyone else who is here today to support the Child Mind Institute, a cause very close to my heart. As a longtime supporter of the Child Mind Institute and as a mom, I've been incredibly proud and grateful to see how they have risen to the challenge of responding to the mental health needs of kids and families across the country during this pandemic. While we've all been affected by COVID-19 in different ways, it's clear that the coronavirus and its effects have disproportionately impacted those who are already vulnerable in our society. As a nonprofit organization, the Child Mind Institute relies on the generosity and commitment of supporters like us, who are not willing to accept a reality in which some children are left to deal with the mental health effects of the coronavirus without adequate support because of where they live or what their parents do for a living. So remember that we're here today not only to learn tips and guidance as we enter a school year like no other from our fabulous panelists, but also to ensure that the Child Mind Institute can continue to provide more equitable access to mental health services for families in need across the country. For example, on childmind.org/back-to-school luncheon, you'll see that $1,000 supports the development of free, bilingual, evidence-based resources on children's mental health for educators and families. A gift of $500 allows 10 teachers to participate in an educator stress management workshop, and $300 sponsors 12 students to attend a digital social emotional skill building workshop. And I want to say a special thanks to my fellow co-chair, Chris Mack, who has agreed to match every donation made today and through the end of this week, dollar for dollar, up to $100,000, meaning your gift will have double the impact. Another great incentive to give generously. Without further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy the discussion with Allie, Madeline, and Stephanie.
Hi, everybody. First of all, I have to say this is the scariest moment of my life so far. I'm not only anxious, my husband's anxious, my children are anxious. I have 2 young girls who are in Zoom school next to me. Madeline, the title of your book feels almost pathetic right now. I mean, we need about 6 hours to sort of unpack all the anxiety and everything that's going on in the world. But how can you talk to us about helping our kids get through this incredibly anxious period?
So I did not know the pandemic was coming when I wrote that book. It came out about it came out 3 weeks before lockdown here in California. But what was clear was that the skill set that was going to be needed in the world was going to be very different than our traditional point of view about what was important, which was grades and a good college and staying right on track. And I got very interested in this. I co-founded a project called Challenge Success at Stanford, and that's kind of a school reform project. And in doing that, I got to see the value of socio-emotional skills, the kinds of things that people have heard about and know about. And I was talking about how they're more valuable now. We need to shift our attention. I'm near Silicon Valley, Google, Facebook, Morgan Stanley, anything was were very clear that they were looking for different kinds of kids. So that's what started the book. That and the fact that The Price of Privilege, which was the first book I wrote about that, is 15 years old. And kids weren't getting better. I mean, I spent the last 15 years on the road talking to schools and families and universities, and everybody's shaking their head, yes, kids need more sleep and fewer APs, and nothing really changed. As we know, the rates of particularly anxiety and depression continued to go up. So, I mean, that was a challenge to me. I spent 15 years, sort of pushing another model, and individually it helped, as I'm sure you'll say, individually it has helped people, but as a cultural shift, it didn't happen. And I think what this has shown us, this pandemic, economic collapse, crazy government, I mean, on and on, the things that are happening in the country right now. I'm in California, the sky is orange, is that all those skills that 2 years ago people were saying they needed, curiosity and creativity and resilience and adaptability and socio-emotional skills, boy, do we need them now. And
let me stop you right now, because Madeline, Stephanie, I want to, for the sake of time and for the kind of crisis we're in, I'm just going to say this. Kids had anxiety, kids had depression. We had high suicide rates already. Social media, the sexualization of our girls, the boys looking at porn. Cut to pandemic, civil unrest. Again, I have a high schooler, trying to get into college. Does the college have any money left? I mean, so my question to you is, right now, help me and everybody watching deal with anxiety with our kids, depression, remote schooling, and tell me as a parent, how the hell do I deal with this when I'm anxious and I'm circling the drain myself?
So you need to not be circling the drain.
I'm trying. The cholesterol is 300.
Well, oh no, that's not good. So you're supposed to eat well and sleep well, and I don't want to go through the list that everybody knows at this point. Eat well, sleep well, get your exercise, take up a gardening habit or a cooking habit or something like that.
But I want to parent by example.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's really, Ellie, what I would kind of jump in and say is that kids are going to learn in this situation. What they learn is going to be based on the adults around them, right? What we're modeling, how we're reacting to our own stress. When we're stressed, it is okay to have a response and to model that for your kids. It's also the next step to let them know we're going to get through this together. So when we're dealing with anxiety for kids, we want to be empathic, and then we want to be encouraging. We want to validate them. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. Maybe you want to check in about where they're getting their information. And then we also want to encourage them that we're going to move through this just like we've managed challenges in the past. This feels a lot more intense, but a lot of the same skills, a lot of the same coping mechanisms will apply.
And listen to them, right? We have to listen to them.
Listen to them. And I think that thing about the same coping skills, look, as adults, we've all been through challenge before, right? You get to be my stage of life, you've been through challenges. We all have a skill box, coping skills that we go to automatically. For me, it's writing. It's always been writing. It's not enough to have one really good coping skill now. So I think one of the things I've learned from this is to step back, pause, reset, and think about what other coping skill. You can think about what other coping skill would help you. What do you need to make more robust? For me, it was relationships. I raised 3 boys, had a career. My husband's a surgeon. He was never home. It wasn't enough to be a writer. You can't write 16 hours a day. I had to come up with something in addition and talk to my kids about the same thing, even though they're grown. What can you add to that toolbox? And for me, it was actually about relationships, because at the end of the day, the hardest thing about this is the isolation that we've been through other tough times. Wars brings people together, victory gardens. We've never been through a time like this where we're all isolated.
Well, and Stephanie, maybe you can speak to this too. I mean, remote learning is having its challenges, and kids are feeling isolated. Also, what do you both say to the athletes and to people that had extracurricular activities that can no longer do them?
It's challenging. I think, when we're managing disappointment, Allie, what you said about listening to kids is really important. I think we have to really make sure that we're not putting adult worries on kids, making assumptions about what they're disappointed about and how they're managing it. We need to ask. We need to open that dialogue, and we need to understand that it's going to be a continuous dialogue. So it's going to be a seed that you plant, and then you're going to water it across time. Managing disappointment, you can still use those same E's, right? You can be empathetic and encouraging. And if there's alternative creative planning that you can do, if you can do a socially safe distance relay race in your backyard, or set up something creative in that way, then do it, right? But you got to brainstorm. And again, what's going to be important for kids is watching how you brainstorm. To Madeline's point, reaching out to colleagues, to peers, to extended family. Do they have ideas about how to make that relay race work, right? Mm-hmm. I think those are the kinds of things that are going to be really important and are going to help us to identify exactly what our kids are actually struggling with.
And don't you think, Stephanie, also that we have to not catastrophize this. It feels pretty catastrophic, actually, some days. But the idea that we've gotten through things before, that we're a brave family, we will manage to get through this. I'm not worried about our kids not being able to manage through this. They'll have resources, they have friends, they had good education. They will manage another 6 months. The kids I'm really worried about are the kids who don't have those kinds of advantages, who were behind to begin with. I want to take 1 second and thank the people who are listening to this, because they're supporting Child Mind, which means those kids who are vulnerable will stand a chance with very good, intervention. But I think the idea of being brave in this time actually counts for something. I hear too many people talking about it's the end of the world. Young kids don't understand irony. I want to make this point. I had a mom say to her son, the boy says, can I have a play date with Jacob when this ends? And the mom says, sure, I'll pencil it in. He's 8. I'll pencil it in because who knows, the world might not be here. Now, she thought that was funny, and it might be funny if you understood irony at all. But an 8-year-old doesn't understand irony. So you also have to speak to the level of the developmental level of the child you're talking to.
I mean, especially when it comes to disappointment, too. There's a lot of disappointment right now.
There is, Allie, though, in terms of disappointment, again, it is about making sure that if you're going to be disappointed as the parent about it, take a moment first to wallow. Take a moment first before you talk with your kids about it, wallow, put it in perspective with your partner as you need to, so that when you approach it with your child, you're in a slightly different place, right? And you're able to start brainstorming. You're allowed to give them some time to wallow as well, but then help them to kind of move forward. I work with a little guy right now, 7-year-old, and he was just devastated about missing the county fair. Devastated. I'm embarrassed to tell you how many appointments this child was crying about the county fair that we went through remotely. And eventually, when his mother and I talked with him at great detail about we were creating, things in the backyard. We're thinking about getting this kid a camel ride that's safely socially distanced. Finally asked him what he was most upset about. Fried dough.
I get it.
Every time of year I get fried dough. Mom was like, I can get an air fryer. I can make this happen. My point there is that this 7-year-old really did have something that was meaningful to him, and it took us a while to get there. So we need to make sure that when we're managing disappointment, we're managing the right stuff. And as Madeline said, not catastrophizing, not putting adult worries on kids.
Yeah. No, I mean, I have a senior who's worried about missing prom and missing graduation. And, it's going to, my husband, George, is going to have to give her a corsage. I'm going to have to take a picture of the two of them in the backyard. But so, Madeline, to what you said about, we're incredibly lucky. We have the resources. The people that are listening to this, they have the Child Mind Institute. Let me ask you this. What are the signs we should be looking for that our kids are maybe not flourishing right now? Depression, suicidal thoughts, slipping in school, drugs, anything that you can help us as parents look for so that we can help them. If that's going down.
Yeah, it does. But I want to make a little bit of clarification between anxiety and an anxiety disorder. Everybody's anxious. If you're not anxious now, you're not paying attention.
Yeah, I'm talking about chronic anxiety, not sort of daily life anxiety.
Right. So, technically we look for symptoms like sadness, anxiety, regression, clinging. For a lot of teenagers, it's irritability as opposed to sadness. So depression looks a little different in teenagers, especially teenage boys, but not for a day. You have a kid who says, I'm not getting out of bed today. Don't rush off to anything. It needs to take place technically over 2 weeks, whatever. It's an arbitrary amount of time. I always say, talk to your pediatrician first, because your pediatrician knows your kid and has seen thousands of kids, not the 2 or 3 that you have seen. And I also think that parents know when their kids are in trouble. I think we know the difference between a crabby kid and a really distressed kid. And I think we need to trust ourselves. And we also need to be able to sit with our child's distress. And I'm curious how you feel about this, Stephanie, but one of the things that was in Ready or Not a lot was about the inability of parents to tolerate their own children's distress. So moms would say to me, I can't stand to see my child unhappy. And my answer was always, and you're in the wrong profession. You have to be able to tolerate your child's unhappiness. This is how your child grows a muscle around resilience and competence. So, you're looking for an extended period of time. You're looking for your gut. You're looking for teariness. You're looking for a change in your child's capacity to function. And not on a daily level, but over a week or 2 or 3.
Yeah. Stephanie, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I totally agree, Madeline, that I think that, we're looking at frequency, intensity, severity, and truly the trend, right? So everybody's going to have a bad day. They're going to have 2 bad days, and we can expect some regression, some clinginess, some excessive crying from the kids and from the adults, to be honest, right? But what we're looking for is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Is it staying the same? And Madeline, I 100% agree that parents are absolutely going to have to flex the flexibility muscle, and they're going to have to learn how to manage not just their own distress, but their children's distress, because again, it's about modeling, and kids learn not just what we tell them, but what we show them as well.
Now, go ahead.
I just want to tag on to that. This whole thing about learning to deal with uncertainty, which is so hard, and our brain hates uncertainty. Our brain just hates likes patterns and predictability. And the fact is, it's always uncertain. This is just smacked us in the face. It's like diving into the deep end of the pool when you don't know how to swim. We think we have so much control much of the time. We really don't. People get sick, accidents, all kinds of things happen.
Yeah.
So this is a full-on learning experience, and I think it could be treated as a learning experience. Life is unpredictable. How do you get through it? And one of the ways I think you get through it is by being of service to other people. And that's just my point of view. I think we're suffering from a lack of meaning. What the hell is this about? Nobody knows what it's about. I have no meaning. I'm not going to college, or my college is closed, or I don't know. And I think there's a deficit of meaning. And I think part of the cure for that is to get kids enlisted in some kind of service. It takes, especially teenagers and young adults, it takes advantage of where they are developmentally, a little feisty, a little social justice, and inserts a greater sense of meaning. I think that's protective.
I think that's very true. And I can only speak for myself that I do get comfort in that we are all in it together, as opposed to, something just that I would be personally having to deal with in my own life. There is a sense of like, this is why we're all talking now. How do we help our kids? And also the idea, as you said, of activism, of helping. I mean, we're such a polarized society now that if we can teach this generation to help out, if a neighbor needs something, any little gesture. But the other thing about this generation, this Gen Z, is that they have grown up on social media. So now we're at a time when we are, depending on where you live in the country, we are quarantined, or at least we're housebound for all intents and purposes. And this generation of kids is on their phones and on their tablets. Now they're having school, they're just on screens 24/7. Don't we have to now figure out the guidelines for kids in terms of their mental health about how we're managing these screens?
Yeah, Ellie, there needs to be a balance. And I think that it's going to need to be a balance that is different for every family and every situation, because what we know about screen time is that it is always a part of the picture. It is going to be about making sure that you're eating healthy, that you're getting exercise, and that the things that you're doing on screens, there is some diversity to it, right? So what you're saying, there is some learning aspects, but then there's also some social aspects that maybe have to do with extended family. Maybe you have a kind of group Marco Polo going back and forth where you can send videos back and forth to family, not just sitting there watching YouTube videos, scrolling through Instagram all day, right? I think it's going to be about also talking with your kids a lot more about what they're doing on social media, how they're spending their time, and then how they're processing that information. There's some.
I feel like parents now have the time to have these conversations we weren't able to before. I also would say, I have a tendency to get very negative about social media because I've done too much research on what happens to girls and boys when they go down the dark path. But I will say, and I want to know what you guys think, that social media has been very helpful during this time, that it is the one way that kids are getting connection. And there was no FOMO for a while, which in my house was great. But so tell me about the pros and cons right now.
So one of the things that I think about social media, I think you have to decide which hills you're going to die on right now. What are the things that are critical to make changes around? And I have this very simple point of view. Your goal is getting through this pandemic as a reasonably intact family. That's what I tell the patients that I work with, is you've got to decide what you need to do to get through this. And it's like, is that a low bar? I think that's a high bar. Yeah. And I think that's the goal of what we should be striving for. So people are saying, do I change the amount of screens my kids watch? And I don't want huge fights in the house about screens right now. Screens are where kids connect with each other. Creative kids use them in all kinds of ways. It's just, like I said, it's not the hill I want to die on. If a kid is in bed on screens all day long or doom scrolling all day long to see what's going on, then it's an issue. But I like bringing kids into the discussion about screens, having them do the most effective things I've seen is when the kid does the research on screen use, not when the parent comes in and says, it's not really that good for you. You're comparing yourself, and besides, boys learning about sex on it. It's like, have them find that, as older kids, have them find that out themselves. But I'm not going to encourage big fights around whether it should be 2 hours or 3 hours of being on screens. For a lot of kids, this is the only place their connection's taking place. Relationships matter more than anything else. So.
Yeah, I have to say, my kids, I didn't know you could do this. My kids showed me that you could see how many hours of screen time you've been on your phone, and I was double my kids, and they were like, Stephanie, do you have any advice for kids and screens right now?
I would echo what Madeline is saying, and that it is going to be about arguments in the household. And I want parents to not feel guilty if they do need to use screens as a resource for them to be able to get through their day, if they're needing to be on a busy call or a work remote type of thing. But I would say, again, it's about balance and just knowledge, really making sure that you're inserting yourself, finding out what they're doing, join them on a TikTok video if you need to make sure that you're in there.
That's funny. And what kinds of issues are you having from kids and parents about remote learning? I know. I mean, I get it. It's a 90-minute discussion, but what are the big ones, and how are you answering them? But I'm getting just headaches. My kids have headaches.
Yeah, it's a spectrum. I think that there are some kids that are honestly thriving, living their best life, and they were very disorganized to start. Now everything's in one place and things are a little bit different for them. I also have, some parents who are feeling like they are ready to be done with this for sure, and we're ready 1 week into it. So it really depends. But what I would say is that I think that making sure that you spend some dedicated time prior to the start, or if you haven't yet, now, some dedicated time to getting yourself organized, getting your kids organized, and try to have some boundaries. I know it's really challenging, but try to have some boundaries. And once you set them, actually follow them. If you told someone you're going to do remote learning with your kid from 1 to 3, if you have to set an away message at work so people know you're not available from 1 to 3, do it. If that means you have to put a visual stoplight on your office door or maybe just your desk to indicate to your child, I'm not available from 2 to 3 because now I'm on a call. Come heck or high water, if no one's bleeding and no one died, you're not getting off that call to go attend until 3 p.m., right? Or until the traffic light has moved to green and you are now available. But I think boundaries, while they are very challenging, can be our friend in this situation.
Right. And there's nothing to say that's going to make it easy. Period. There's nothing to say that's going to. It is incredibly stressful. I was online yesterday with 2 communities in Texas, literally right next door to each other. One is everybody's back in school, and right next door, down the block, nobody's in school. So it's very much community by community. There's way too much shaming around what you send your kids to school. You want your mother to die or think, it's just, there's a lot of shaming going on around decision making, which is really unfortunate. Everybody's doing the best that they can. And again, I think your attitude has to be something akin to, this sucks, you'll make it through. I have confidence in you. I think we often make kids feel like we don't really have a lot of confidence in them. So how can I help you? All the time in the office, as opposed to, you've got this. I think you can do this.
Right.
You'll be okay. And I think those are better messages for kids.
Should we give them a break right now academically in terms of, have to get a great test score, have to get straight A's, can we give them a break?
We should, Ellie. This is not a time to be worried about the performance. This is a time to be worried about the path. To point to Madeline's book and to kind of bring it full circle that way. This is about how we adapt. This is not going to be how we manage plan A. It's going to be how we plan for plan B and how we deal with plan C. It's going to be about flexibility, and kids, especially younger kids, are going to need to learn how to learn first. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be important for the math problem's not going to be important. The learning how to learn is going to be important. The learning how to get yourself grounded, how to set yourself up in this new situation, how to be flexible, that's going to be the most important. And that's what we want to praise, attend to, and make a big deal out of for our kids.
And I want to add to that. I know we have to stop, but I want to add to that was the wrong thing to be focused on before this started. And if we go right back to don't sleep, stay up all night, I don't care, you got to get that egg to get into, if we go back to that, it will have been a waste of the pandemic, because we see that there are much better ways for kids to learn, to get curious, to get involved, to be engaged.
I agree. I know we have a lot of questions for people that are watching. If you have a question, type it in right now. Here's one for both of you from the audience. Is there a way to be of service on screen?
Sure. You've got a buddy in my community, Jewish Family and Children's Service, doing a great job of hooking up kids and elderly people, and so they got a friend. I mean, if you have an hour of touching in with each other every couple days, it's a world of difference. So yes, on screen, and yes, I'm in California. There are distance protocols, mask protocols. You can deliver food. You can do things like you can teach a kid on screen. You can be a go-to person for a child who doesn't have go-to people in their lives. There's plenty of things. What do you think?
I also think, and then Stephanie, you can answer that too, that there are a lot of opportunities right now for our kids to help underserved kids that need tutoring and need help, certainly in their not so great school situation as well.
Right.
I totally agree, Allie. I mean, I think it is about volunteering and thinking about what skills do you have and how can you offer them up to other people right now. I know of a woman who actually reached out to her local library and found out that they're no longer doing circle time. And she reached out to the folks that typically attended, and now she holds circle time virtually for those kids. And it's a beautiful, nice thing that they get to do weekly, not just for her, but for those parents as well. They get a little time off. So.
Okay.
really super important. We think of serving other people, but the research is really clear that the person who's doing the serving gets just as much, if not more, than the person being served. So it helps us to have a sense of being useful and meaningful in this time.
We only have time for one more question, and it's something that I've been dealing with at home, which is, how do we deal with the role of like Netflix? So we have the social media component, and then we have, kind of free reign watching. We let our youngest daughter watch The Hangover 1, 2, 3, which I don't think we would have done if we were not in a pandemic. Should we kind of loosen the reins when it comes to that too?
Allie, I think it's okay to loosen the reins if you're going to watch along with and explain, right? Because I think that if you're privy to what information they're getting and how they're getting it and helping them to process it, that's a lot different than just kind of letting them have free reign. So I don't know that I think any of us would recommend free reign at this point, because definitely we do need to make sure we're monitoring and keeping a close eye on what kids are gathering and how they're taking that information in. And if you have the time and you can sit down, I think it's about joining with them and really helping them to understand what information and what's real, what's not, what's, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's a great time for critical learning skills around media. So especially for older kids, everybody's going to die. Says who? Where'd you get that from? How do you know it's true? I mean, the teenagers and the young adults love the media literacy because they hate being played, So it's an opportunity. And I'm not sure that I could watch The Hangover 1, 2, 3 with my kids.
Oh, Madeline, you're missing out.
One of the things we've done is my husband and I do alternate days. So I like really, crappy movies because I'm thinking all day long. I just want to be entertained. And he loves history. So, we take turns.
So I first of all, thank you so much, both of you, Madeline Levine and Stephanie Lee. You've actually been very helpful and optimistic, because what I'm hearing from you is we do have a time now where we can communicate with our kids. We can talk to them about all these things. Madeline's going to watch The Hangover with her kids. And thank you. There was really a lot of food for thought today.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to the people who have supported this lunch.
Truly, thank you all.
That was wonderful. Thank you to our panelists, Dr. Madeline Levine, Dr. Stephanie Lee, and our moderator, Allie Wenworth, for such a lively, thought-provoking, and enlightening conversation. In addition to the speakers, I'd like to extend a huge thank you to our co-chairs and host committee members for making this event happen. And a very special thank you to the extraordinary generosity of our platinum sponsor, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Today could not have been possible without their commitment, and we are so grateful. The Child Mind Institute relies on the generosity of individuals like you to make our work with children and families possible, especially this year. Across the country and the world, nonprofits like us have stepped in to offer critical services during the pandemic, even as donations have decreased. So please consider making a donation today. On behalf of the kids and families we serve, we thank you for your partnership on this journey. It's been a pleasure to have you with us. I hope to see you all in person soon. Stay safe and stay well.